Good morning, Mr. Chung. How are you today?
Good morning, Ms. Yarbrough. Doing good?
Pretty good. What we're going to do today is review the lesson that was observed on May 30th, 2013. This should not take more than 45 minutes. I would like to discuss the reinforcement objective and why continuing what's going out well is important. How are you going to continue to do the objective well? And the refinement objective and why improving the refinement is important to student learning. We will look at your post-conference report scores and your self-scores together. How do you think, in general, the lesson went? What do you think went well? I may take notes. I pulled it up here so I can look here and take notes. And if you want to take notes while we talk, that's fine as well. Let me just pull this right here. It was up, but then it went away. Okay, I have it. Go ahead.
Okay. I think what went well was it's really student centered and it's project based. So the students get to pick their topics based on their student interests, and I can also help them with their student readiness. It's flexible for them to choose different topics, and they're interactive. They're in groups, and they get to use the computer and different books and different resources to research their topics.
So by the end of today's conference, you'll be able to kind of describe the activities you're going to continue to use to reinforce hands-on learning in your lessons to improve student learning. And it sounded like that's what you shared, because it's student interest and student-centered, and you have, I guess, some technology resources that help the students connect. You'll be able to talk a little bit more about how that improves learning. When you plan a lesson like you do with the student projects and student-centered, how do you determine what activities will best promote hands-on learning that will support your learning objective, your learning goal, that are challenging rigorously, right, and elicit like a variety of thinking? So I know you shared that it's very student-centered and the students kind of are interested because they chose the projects. So how do you decide which activities to kind of guide them? Because I know they make a lot of decisions when it's student-centered like that.
Okay, so I use the data from previous test scores or formative assessments. I also try to find meaningful learning, things that relate to their lives, and that makes it authentic. So I also look for challenging. I try to find challenging questions for them to research and inquiry-based.
How do you, when you say you try to find, what do you look?
Well, when I'm reading it, I try to see what may come as a misconception to me, or I know my students, so I see where they could get confused on certain areas. So I try to challenge them in those areas to make sure that they master that concept.
So here are some things that I did notice. Noticed. Students were engaged and interested due to having a choice of topics and flexibility in the way they researched and presented their topics. Did you agree that that was pretty much evident?
Yes.
Okay. The teacher inspired self-direction and monitoring by providing clear expectations, demonstrating the expectations, and allowing students freedom to research using iPads and the computer. As the teacher explained, after you make your list, what are you going to do? That was what you actually said during the lesson, and that's forcing them to think critically about the next step. You are going to describe one event, then you are going to relate it to a specific TEK. When you said that specific TEK, you have talked to the students already about the TEKs and how it's connected?
Yes.
Was that a struggle for them?
Not so much. I guess at the start, just understanding what a TEK is, but after I gave them the paper with the list of TEKs and it showed objectives and the reported categories, and I kind of went over how their STAR test is structured and how many questions go in which areas and readiness standards. They kind of understand that each time we do a lesson, we're going over a specific objective or concept, and so they know that they're going to have to relate it to a standard that they're going to have to learn in math, science, social studies, or language arts. And with that, I'm also there to help them tie it in. They'll tell me what they're researching, and they'll show me what they're interested in, and if they're having trouble relating it to math, science, social studies, or language arts, because they had the choice to pick whatever they wanted to research, but relating it was the challenge for them. So I was also there to guide them and say, oh, okay, well, this is like when you learn this in world history, or what you learned in world geography or math or science, you can relate it this way.
Okay, so they needed some help to connect the topic to something outside of the school, like authentic or evaluate their own thinking. Is that
like
kind of what was
to find it? I guess like, because they could use Study Island, but maybe they were having trouble finding where exactly that TEK was. They know, if they're doing World War II, they just needed a little bit of help finding where it said World War II and where the TEK is actually listed on Study Island.
And did they need some help, do you think, connecting that World War II kind of concept to the project and the TEK together?
I guess that may be a little easy, because one person chose 1987 was DNA was first used to convict criminals. So that person knew that we went over DNA in biology class. So they wanted to, they didn't know what part of DNA they were going to be looking at, and I told them, oh, this is DNA fingerprinting. And remember when we were looking at the bands, there's dark bands that show, and that's like a DNA fingerprint that shows what species are related, or if there's a person that's related to that DNA. So I kind of helped her. I printed out where to find it on Study Island, and I gave her that information, and she researched through that and tied it into her presentation.
So that worked well.
Yes.
Awesome. You have your cup. There's a recommended action to continue reinforcement, because that was obviously a strength in terms of hands-on activities and the interests of the students, and connected it to critical thinking and to the TEKs. So that was a strength.
Yes.
So your skill in promoting hands-on learning was clearly evident, and your facilitating of the student learning in the project-based connected with the TEKs was an example of how you had hands-on activities that matched what you were doing. Continue to design your lesson plans to engage all students, encourage student interaction, spark student interest, evoke problem solving, and facilitate meta connection, coming straight from the rubric on what's going on when you have those kinds of hands-on activities in your project. So continue to do that. Why do you think the activities you're doing in your project-based instruction that are related to hands-on learning, why do you think that they will promote hands-on learning through activities that are challenging and that it listed a variety of thinking and that are important to student learning? Why do you think those kind of activities are important to student learning, what you're doing with the projects and the hands-on learning?
They get to actually experience it with the hands-on learning, and through the research they find out how it's relevant to their life or to real-life situations. So they get to connect it and apply it later on.
And how does that improve their learning if they're able to apply it later on? How will that improve their performance?
Well, when applying it will improve because they've learned it and tied it in, and they've seen an example. And then it's continuous because whenever they're applying it, then they may learn more things and build on it, their strengths.
Are you using APs to kind of monitor that assessment prompts?
Yes.
To see if what you just said is happening? Okay. And the results kind of lend themselves well to showing that it's really working with the hands-on and the connection and the TEKs?
Yeah, it works, and it also shows me gaps.
Awesome. When it shows you gaps, what do you do in terms of differentiation and all that?
If it's a gap that most groups may encounter, then I'll speak loud enough where all the groups can hear me, or I'll stop the class and let them all know as a whole class. Or if it's just a gap that's with that individual student, I'll have that personal conversation with them and guide them and scaffold for them.
Awesome. You created a learning environment that was intrinsically motivating and encouraged the students to use materials and a variety of thinking throughout the lesson. But there were some connections with the project and the products, ongoing vocabulary development, and word walls. How do you think you could change or improve the activities to directly relate comprehensible input and vocabulary development to student learning?
I would put more things up on the wall. I used to have, word walls and their projects up, and we just got finished with testing, so I took everything down. But I would like to. I saw when I was looking through the rubric, I saw my comprehensible input wasn't matching as much because I didn't really have a lot of posters and my word wall wasn't up. So I would like to, after we do these projects, I'm gonna put them up and they'll be around for people to see and other students to learn from too. But I would like to put more things on the wall for vocabulary and to reinforce their learning.
Awesome, because that would be your area of refinement, so the area to improve. So specific examples from what was scripted were that teachers spoke clearly and in sufficient volume for all students to hear. The teacher also focused students on speaking clearly. For example, when he said, "Richard, you need to speak a little louder," and turned off the AC for student presentation. I guess the AC was loud. The teacher provided an exemplar of the expected product and explained it to the class. But that was good. The teacher built vocabulary skills when he asked, "What are melanocytes?" Melanocytes. However, the teacher didn't use the other vocabulary development strategies, such as what we talked about, the word walls, and maybe some vocabulary definition, word parts, antonyms, and synonyms that might have been helpful. And the teacher did not use total physical responses. What do you know in terms of what you could have done in that area, total physical responses?
The only thing I can think about is maybe, I guess, at first I was thinking body language, but then as I think about it more, maybe they're, like, how you get students to stand up in front of the class, and like if I'm modeling the sun and the earth going around the moon, or the sun, then I would actually model it out with the students. So maybe actual physical
For those vocabulary words that might be new and difficult for them to learn, that's one example of what you could do.
Yeah, for like rotation and for revolution. Revolution would be just spinning, and then, or revolution would be actually going around the sun, and the revolution would just be spinning in place. So maybe that would be like a physical thing that they could actually model.
With that vocabulary word? Awesome. Have you done anything like that before? Do you feel comfortable doing activities like that?
Yes. I guess I just need to practice it more and remember, this is a perfect time that I can actually use a total physical response.
And if you're preparing your lesson plans, would that be something you would add? Maybe when you come to vocabulary word like that, this is a place for maybe a physical response where vocabulary development might be helpful for the students to make connections and remember?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Because we're in the process right now of creating these lesson plans for next year, so that's a good point.
Yeah, that's...
So having a systematic approach to vocabulary development, for example, what you already mentioned, a word wall maybe with images and the pictures integrated into the classroom routines and projects might be a way, like if you are working on your lesson plans and you are looking at what vocabulary words might lend themselves well to something physical, you can actually detail it in the lesson plan. And that would maybe make it more systemic, that it's going to happen, I don't know, do you do the words every week maybe, on a certain day in the week maybe, and so the kids would know?
We have certain words that are incorporated in each lesson, and through the program that I use, they're already identified, and I make sure I try to find analogies, and I do whenever I do have a chance, I find the synonyms. With the antonyms, that's something that I could work on in the future. I can actually say, okay, what would be the opposite of this, and then try to find the science vocabulary word that would connect to it. But I do like using analogies because they get to see an example, and then with synonyms, they hear many different words. Like with cells, you hear produce, create, synthesize, manufacture, and those are all 4 different words that basically mean the same thing.
And to make it systemic, would it be something that when you go back to your grade level, y'all could talk about how that might work systemically, regularly, in a lesson plan kind of format, since we're doing all these lessons in advance?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that would be something that could happen?
Yes.
Awesome.
And we can also integrate them into, if there's another teacher doing another subject, they can actually help me reinforce that vocabulary word if there's a way they can integrate into the lesson.
Awesome. Another suggestion here is practicing the true meaning of words as a part of each lesson. Maybe that's something that could be systemically included into the planning for the projects. I know some of it is student directed, but if there's been some preparation before could it limit it maybe to a core listing of possible projects, that if the teacher has already kind of identified some of the vocabulary or the language that might be new and difficult to learn, to maybe schedule some time in the lesson for looking at the true meaning of words as a part of the lesson. That's a suggestion there that you see that might be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Based on our discussion right now, I think I hear some things you're going to start doing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go ahead and share as you think about future lessons, which I know you're in the process of doing right now because we're doing that part, how you might adjust the lessons to incorporate more comprehensible input to promote student engagement, and which will lead to greater maybe student achievement and performance in the area of the integrated subjects, science, reading, math, social studies. Can you think of a future lesson right now where you can see some of the things you've already mentioned being incorporated into that?
I could think of the vocabulary or find the vocabulary words or point them out and actually kind of go over them before, like with the words per week or the power words that we use.
Okay, power words.
So
systemically, what would that look like as you're preparing a lesson? Walk me through.
Maybe use it as a warm-up.
A do now?
A do now.
Okay.
So have them doing a little bit of background information so they have some prior knowledge before they're going into the lesson, and then reinforce it for homework and end of the week for vocabulary testing. Also have my visual aids already prepared and with handouts on PowerPoints on the word walls.
So what I heard you say is systemically it could be part of a daily do now,
Mm-hmm.
because it does happen daily, and then you could also reinforce it daily based on your assessment prompts or maybe what they are and are not getting throughout the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
You could reinforce it for homework. I heard you say that. And I love the end of the week including it as a part of the weekly test. And you may have as a part of the weekly test a vocabulary test of some sort that would connect it with their projects and actually give you some information about what connection you're making.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last part was kind of included in like visual aids that you use throughout the lesson. That'll help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they get
good.
it, kinesthetically, auditory, and visual.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. As a review of what we talked about today, We can summarize. How would you say, in terms of we consider this professional development, what you learned during our session or our conversation today?
How would I connect it to professional development?
It is professional
Yes,
development.
okay.
So I want you to tell me what you learned today and, as a part of what we talked about, and how it will impact your lessons for the future.
I learned how to be a more effective lesson planner
In what way?
in ways of systematically planning out my lessons and looking for vocabulary words and things that will reinforce my concepts or objectives.
And as part of that comprehensible input, being stronger in that area.
Yes. And then building on my strengths and continually doing those things that are working for the students' success.
Building on your strengths. I like that connection to Accelerated School. That's what we do. We build on our strengths so that we can connect it. I want to get that last thing you said, to connect it to student learning.
And their success.
And do you have any questions about what we just concluded, which was like our post-conference plan? Any questions?
No, I think it was very helpful, and I think all my questions were answered, and it helped me go back and relive that lesson that we did on May 31st or May 30th, and previous lessons. I got to think about what went well and things I could have improved then too.
Great. I like that because we're in the lesson planning mode right now, getting ready for next year, that it seems like a lot of this can help you in your lessons. So that the first 18 weeks of school, you'll have all of this already worked out for next year. Awesome. So then the next part of our post-conference plan, I want to give you a copy of your evidence notes from the lesson. And it can be helpful as we go through the scoring.
Okay.
Okay, so here's your scoring sheet. And did you bring your scores?
Yes.
Awesome. You didn't bring a copy
Well,
for me?
no, I didn't bring a copy.
Can we
Yeah,
put it in the
sure.
middle? Because one of the things that we can do when we're looking at the self scores and the observer scores is see where we may need to have a discussion about inter-rater reliability.
Okay.
I like to involve the teacher in that because if we're developing this one language about what is effectiveness, then we can see maybe where we need to have some discussions. So as a reminder, when there is a score that is more than one difference, that's where we want to talk about inter-rater reliability. But if there isn't more than one off, then there's no need to really kind of discuss it. We have inter-rater. Okay. So in terms of learning goals, we're no more than one off, and that's fine. But if you want to discuss any of these, let me know. But I'm looking for the ones where we do not have inter-rater reliability to kind of build on. Rigor, where's your copy?
Oh, I was using this one.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Rigor, we have inter-rater reliability. Hands-on learning, we have inter-rater reliability. Comprehensible input, we have inter-rater reliability. Wait. I have a ruler. Hold on a second. That might help us with a ruler. Hands-on learning, we have inter-rater reliability. Comprehensible input, we have inter-rater reliability. Time management, we have inter-rater reliability. Formative assessment, let's come back and talk about formative assessment, where we are more than one off. Checking for understanding, we have inter-rater reliability. Student engagement, we have inter-rater reliability. Student engagement, let's talk about student engagement, where we may not have inter-rater reliability. Cooperative learning, we have inter-rater reliability.
And then I didn't.
Do you want to do those last two? So we can see where we are. Awesome. So we have integrated reliability there. So let's look at our notes for formative assessment and student engagement to see where we may differ on that evidence note. Formative assessment. The teacher provided clear learning expectations aligned to the TEKS. The teacher circulated to each group every few minutes, assessing progress by asking students, for example, so what are some events that you all found? After one student presented to the class, the teacher instructed the class, tell her one good thing and one thing she could do better, which allowed students to provide feedback to one another. The teacher provided clear exemplars. The teacher assisted students to stay on track throughout the class period by providing feedback and circulating. Students were provided multiple opportunities to improve based on feedback from teacher and student. For example, the teacher stated, if you need help relating your TEKS to math, raise your hand. However, the teacher did not solicit feedback from students about the effectiveness of the learning activities, and it was not clear the degree to which performance was compared to standards. And so in terms of being a 3, it was effective, but to be more effective for the 4 or the 5, there was some indication that there was some not so much clarity on how those activities, formative assessment and what you were gleaning, actually led to better performance from the students and in terms of what was expected in the standards based on what you said in your learning goals. So that was the 3 here.
Okay.
Questions?
I guess when I was filling out my self-scores, I was trying to look at
The 3, you have to stay with the 3.
Yeah, I was staying with the 3, but I also see if I hit anything in the
You can't do your 5 until you make sure that this is absolutely all a 3. That's why we say focus on the 3.
Okay.
Okay. And so the focus on the 3, and I think for our school, we talked about in order to get 4 to 5, we really need to see that the students are performing at that 90% level based on what you did. So if your formative assessments did not give you clarity that, you know, a majority, all of your students were actually at 90% in terms of mastering whatever that concept was, then it's going to be very difficult to get a 4 or 5.
Okay.
And so in terms of what's written here in the evidence, it wasn't clear that the performance was linked to the standards at the 90% level.
Okay.
Hey, okay. So you can go back and review that as well, and we can talk some more about how you might be able to make connections related to how do we determine that what we did in formative assessment gave us proof, evidence that the students were meeting standard at this level, whatever this level is, to get above a 4 or 5, or above a 3.
Yes.
Okay.
Because I can see that it was, I guess the students were more in the developmental stage, and with the learning goal, I guess it didn't. The formative assessment didn't hit that 90% because they weren't fully finished with their projects.
Gotcha. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, cool. The next one was student engagement. Student engagement. Alright, the evidence note shows that learning was active and interactive with a focus on engaging all students through group work, student choice, and interesting topics. Students were intrinsically motivated to find something interesting to them. The teacher stated, quote, I'm going to pass out the iPads. You're going to find which detail interests you the most, find a TEK, and relate it to that TEK. Students were to compete in the Battle of the Decades later that week, which further motivated students. Student effort was reinforced and recognized when this class clapped at the end of the student presentation and when the teacher circulated to check in with each group. The learning experiences required moderate levels of inquiry, curiosity, and to create their own products. However, it was unclear how students truly mastered each TEK. And so I'm going to look at the words moderate levels of inquiry, curiosity, and exploration Because I think that's what led to the 3. And so, do you think it was more than moderate, and that it was more rigorous than what's stated here? Because even though you had all the students doing everything, which is really great, it somehow wasn't evident that they mastered the TEAC, even though they made the connection to the TEAC. So the piece we added in an LIM with leadership was they've got to be able to determine that there was mastery in order to show a 4 or 5.
In student engagement?
In all the indicators.
Okay.
There's got to be that strong connection that everything you're doing is not only powerful, interactive, continuous, authentic, learner-based, but also inclusive, but also actually shows that the teacher took all these engaging activities and performed at this level to guarantee that they're going to master that team. It's got to lead to mastery. So that's what I'm seeing here on this 3. That there was all this engagement and quite a bit of interaction that was absolutely powerful, but did it end up with the observer seeing that all of these kids, or 90% of them, or 100% of them at 90% accuracy, could actually perform that TEAC at 90% accuracy? That's what the evidence notes is saying might have been lacking.
So, their learning goal was to describe one event in detail and relate it to one of the TEACs.
Did the learning goal have all 4 components? With what rigor? Description isn't rigorous. So with what rigor? What was rigorous? What's your hearts in there?
I didn't have to memorize my learning
Oh
goal.
yeah, it may be here. Sometimes they quote it in there.
By the end of today's lesson, I will be able to describe one event in detail from the list of events I create as I research the decades my group chose to, and relate that event to a specific TEAC. From one of the content areas, math, science, social studies, or ELA, by developing, and I could also put relate. So developing and relate, because they have to do the presentation poster board, or a PowerPoint, or a research paper.
Okay.
So I put developing because they're going to have to develop an accurate description, not just describe it verbally or just with a summary.
So developing is something in writing? Something written?
It's either written or a PowerPoint or a presentation or the poster board or those trifold boards.
Cool.
So they had a choice on their product or differentiated products.
Okay.
With developing a 90% accurate description with 100% of the class.
So how were you going to measure that they mastered that learning goal? If they had it?
Oh, with going around and circling and interacting with the students, I can help guide them and scaffold to help them reach that 90%. So that
was very powerful because she mentions that. But what kind of empirical data was going to come out of this to show you that not only were they able to identify the TEAC, but they can master that particular TEAC? Because that's what I'm thinking was missing here.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm trying to see where the student engagement, because like
the student engagement was great.
Yeah.
But the issue at our school, is we have great student engagement with no learning. That's been our problem for several years. So now as a part of leadership, when we go and observe, it's got to be engaging and lead to what specific learning that's going to show up in the performance. And so we've had lots of conversations about, we're doing all these wonderful activities, and you remember in some of the LIMs where we focus on, we're doing all these interaction. We get the banner for interactiveness. But does it lead to student learning? And I think that's what the evidence notes is asking here. What was mastered and how do you know it was mastered? So if they can present and create a poster, was that what you were calling mastery?
If I evaluated it and assessed it as mastery.
So you have a rubric
so
maybe?
It wouldn't just be create the poster and they've mastered it. I would actually have to look and have the TEAC and see where it's meeting those mastery levels.
So would you have like a rubric to say they mastered this TEK. Not only did they identify the TEK that was connected, but they also mastered whatever this TEK requires you to do, whether it had so many digits, or I don't know if it was a math TEK or a science TEK, whatever. Could they do that, and how did you know? Do you have a rubric that might help you with that?
I have certain questions that go along with the
Gotcha.
TEK.
So you might want to make sure, were they posted or were they around, or
Well, I have them, and then I also ask them
the students?
informally.
So do the students have those questions?
I do hand them to them, but I handed them to them afterward, and I give them, because I want them to create it, and I don't want them.
Right, for the inquiry base?
Yes.
At some point you might want to figure out, because it is inquiry based, what I'm hearing you say to me, they should end up getting to that question before the end.
Or they should be able to answer those questions after they do their research.
And so a more maybe rigorous activity would be maybe for them to identify that question from the TEKs, because they got the TEKs. The questions are coming from the TEKs, right?
Yes.
So they may be able, at the higher level thinking skill, be able to not only answer that question, but generate that question. Because you don't really get the answers to the end, right?
Yes.
But if they're generating those kind of questions throughout the project, they most definitely will be able to answer the questions, maybe at the end of the project. And so then they're not waiting for you to come around and say, what about this? And searching for an answer, because they've already generated some of those kind of questions that you know they know the answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see that. And eventually they will get to that point. At the start with this project-based learning,
Sure.
it's more, me giving them the TEKs, and then later on they're going to understand how to find the TEKs and the questions themselves, but, more independently.
And I like that, because that's got to be a progression of their learning, right? So what we want to make sure we do is every day, because this project-based learning has this time management system that we've got to make sure we're tracking so that they make substantial progress every day, that some of your guidance may be, what should they end up with after a day of working on the project? What kind of questions should they already be able to answer? So like a mini goal within the goal kind of thing might be helpful there, to make sure that they're not only engaged and it's very interesting to them, but they are also already making connections to get to that, I don't know, essential question or some of those essential questions. Would that kind of make sure that they've not only been engaged but also can match up something?
Yeah, I see that now. I guess I wasn't aware that they were going to overlap with the formative assessment and the student engagement. So with that line, I guess I missed that where it says the mastery part.
Okay.
And then I was looking also at even the 5, it says learning experience require moderate levels of inquiry, curiosity, and exploration. So with the 3 and the 5, they both say moderate levels of curiosity and exploration.
So the kicker would be, to what degree can they perform at a certain level to show that they mastered whatever they were engaged in? That would be the short answer.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I will tell you that when you have 3 or fewer, where there's 1 or more off, 2 or more off, you're still iterator reliability. So we do have that with this lesson. High five. Thanks. So we just did a post-conference with Mr. Chung for his Credit King 7th through 12th grade science teacher, English, math, and social studies integration teacher. And I did the post-conference with Mr. Chung, even though I did not do the observation and I did not write the post-conference and the evidence notes. So for the most part, I felt comfortable doing that. And in some situations in schools where you have a lot of teachers and you have a lot going on, you may actually have the need for somebody to do the actual observation, write the actual evidence notes, and the post-conference, and do the scoring, and somebody else to actually conduct the post-conference. So thank you for your flexibility with that. A couple times I missed it when I was reading, like I said something, but I didn't. It was really written. So in general, I thought, and this is basically a video that you might could use or be helpful. You can have that, Evan. You might want to use when you have a new leadership team meeting and training. And you might want to have a debriefing after you've read what they've written and things like that to make sure. And I know you guys have been working closely on getting post-conference and evidence notes that are very factual, to the point, without extemporaneous kind of information in it. And to the most part, I think that worked really well. I did come across one word that was subjective, and I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that, and that it's in the second bullet on the specific examples on the first page from the script. What teacher did relatively well. Reinforcement, the second bullet, the teacher inspired self-direction. And so that may be true, you may feel that way. You don't want that in the writing. So you just want to state that the teacher provided self-directed activities, or you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so that was the only incident. So I know, Ms. Husbands, you've been working hard on that to clear up that kind of language, so I wanted to point that out. I thought otherwise, I don't know, Mr. Chung, if you had anything to share about this. I thought the evidence notes were well written, because I think Mr. Chung did all these wonderful things, but I do see that there were some 3s, but he had some 5s and 4s. So I wanted to make sure that it's reiterated, because, thank you so much. No problem, thank you. I wanted to make sure that, because at our school, we were getting a lot of scores that were not necessarily inflated, but they didn't necessarily show that the student accomplished a lot of learning, even though we had all of these wonderful interactive activities, inclusive activities, student-centered activities. We were getting A+ there, but our data wasn't showing that students were actually mastering. And so one of the things I reminded Mr. Chung of was that we instructed all leadership staff to make sure, when you're looking at any indicator, that there's proof of mastery if someone's going to get a 4 or a 5, because you want to show, and at our school we have a 90% mastery goal that we're trying to achieve, and so you want to show that it was rigorous and it led to this type of performance from the student. And so, and the 2 that we had off by more than 1 was where that became an issue, because Mr. Chung did do really well in each one of those indicators, but there wasn't strong enough evidence that the students actually took that, what the teacher did, and led to this great mastery of the objective. And so those were the kind of conversations we had, and I wanted to make sure that it was very clear that's what was going on in terms of it's a 3, because there was some lack of evidence of mastery at our goal level in this indicator. And that's for all of our indicators, and we did that in leadership, and I don't think you guys were in our leadership team meeting, but all our school leadership knows we're really trying to hone in. As we look at our school data and what we're doing, and we look at our teacher observations, we absolutely want a really good correlation between that. So if teachers are getting 4s and 5s, our data should reflect that, okay? And I just wanted to have this conversation on tape, just in case it might be beneficial to other schools working with leaderships and training and trying to make sure that they have iterative reliability on the evidence. Any questions for me? Clear?
That's very helpful.
Yeah, very helpful? Okay, good. And I thought this was great for me. I know I took it home last night, and I said I was going to read it, and I did skim it, but when I came to that inspired word, I was like, ooh, I missed that. And then I said it on tape, and I wanted to make sure that we had a conversation.
Yes.
Right. Mr. Chung, did you want to add anything?
I guess when we were talking about the student engagement, it said, like 3 and 5, they're basically the same thing, but then at the end it says students create learning plans and projects as individuals and small groups that authentically demonstrate learning. So the key point that you pointed out was the students create learning plans. And
that demonstrate learning is the key.
Yeah, so that's where I would,
90%.
that's where I noticed it, that I didn't do that, so then I would actually drop mine and be in more iterator reliability
Cool.
in that spot.
Cool. Yeah. But you don't have to. I mean, you could if you wanted to, but this is a percentage in terms of TEDs. But that would be your choice to do that. But I wouldn't require you to do that.
Okay.
You know, on your self-scores. You really don't have to.
Okay.
It's the discussion we want to have as we move forward, because I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
You know, he's actually seeing maybe where, hey, I see where, was it a 5? Did you give me something?
The observer score was a 3, and I put a 5.
A 5. So Mr. Chung is saying, instead of my 5, I see where the project maybe didn't demonstrate the mastery.
Yes.
And so I agree, it may not be a 5.
Yeah.
And so at this instance, I might lower mine from a 5 to a 4 or something like that. And then we would be in iterator reliability. And he is absolutely welcome to do that, but not required or encouraged. Because his scores can stay his scores, because it's absolutely his thoughts. And I would even say it's not even a matter of integrity, even though you may see it that way, that you want to drop it to be in line with it. You're not required to, you don't have to, and no observer would say you need to change your score.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's good that you were able to identify that, because the same conversation we had when we were looking at what the students produced, and we're like, okay, we went down the
Talk louder.
well, we went down the indicators, and we were like, okay, so did they really master this? Do we know this? Because they had that product, but did they show the mastery? Because we went through the conversation of saying maybe they just did it because they had the information there to put it on the product, but did they really master it? And so we were on the same page. I just wanted to point that out to see that
With that conversation.
you know, that conversation, to see that you noticed that is a good thing, because then that conversation still was between the two observers.
And
So
what
we
Ms.
went
Yarbrough pointed out was that, you know, to help that, I could have them develop questions while they're going along
We
with
saw
it.
that. Yeah, we talked about that too.
So I think it's been great, Mr. Chung, that you've been able to be in a meeting like this, because maybe a lot of teachers don't feel comfortable talking about their practice with other people, because this is a very non-threatening kind of activity. I'm glad you feel comfortable. I know most teachers don't, and most teachers won't, but that's okay. I'm really proud of you that you can have a candid conversation about your practice, because this is all about how we grow and become more effective. So kudos to you, and thank you so much. 1, 2.